Welcome to Falmouth Affordable Housing Summit tonight. It's so encouraging to see so many of you here this evening in a rainy night coming out, so thank you for coming. I'd like to make mention that in our audience tonight, amongst you, we have Selectman Sam Patterson, Selectman Doug Brown. Doug. We also have Town Manager Julian Suso. Hey, Julian. And Assistant Town Manager Peter Johnson Staub. Thank you. So we have a very full agenda tonight. I will try to keep us to our time limits. So tonight, our summit is about the face of affordable housing in Falmouth, myth versus reality. Over the past year or two, you may remember that we developed an update to our housing production plan. And when we did that, we came out with a lot of data, almost 200 pages of data about our housing needs. And we felt that it was time to really bring home the face of affordable housing. Who are the residents in town that need housing, that have housing, and what are their stories? And tonight you're going to hear some stories from 3 of our residents. Also tonight, you will hear about the challenges in creating affordable housing in Falmouth, and some of the strategies employers in town have used to house employees. While I don't want to inundate you with data, I felt that it was good to provide you with a few data points that'll help set the stage for tonight's discussion. I have a brief slideshow for that. Myth versus reality. So we talk about affordable housing. What does affordable housing mean? Well, it's a term that is coined by various state statutes and our federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. Affordability is a unit based on a renter or an owner spending 30% of their income on their housing costs. We have some additional data here about costs of homes and a rental. The median home price in Falmouth in 2018 was $400,000. That was 2018. We know these numbers go up yearly, and we're thinking now it's about $435,000 for a median price of a home. To afford that mortgage, someone needs to earn a minimum of $85,000 to $90,000 a year. The rental rate for a 2-bedroom apartment, we're looking at $1,129. Well, that's a little low in some occasions too. Some of you know that. To afford that, somebody needs to earn $52,000 a year. These are the folks we're talking about who need affordable housing. Who needs affordable housing? Affordable units are targeted to people earning 80% of the area median income. Now that's a number that HUD, the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, puts together based on census data. We use Barnstable County here. The area median income for Barnstable County is $91,300. Now, we look at 80% of that income for affordable units. What is 80% for Barnstable County? For a household size of 1, $51,250. For 2, $58,600. A family of 3, $65,900. And finally, a family of 4, $73,200. Now, in our culture here, we don't usually talk about what our income is. And so I put together some data to help show you what people earn for entry-level jobs in town. We have our 80% of area median income. What are Falmouth entry-level wages? For a policeman, $54,717. Well, that would be okay if it was just a family of one trying to afford a unit at 80% of area median. For a firefighter, $57,439. What about our library staff? Our library assistant, $26,130. These are people who we work with on a daily basis, who help us accomplish our daily tasks and our needs. Teacher salary, entry-level teacher, $47,329. Medical assistant in your doctor's office, $33,280. The supermarket clerk, $24,960. Finally, how about our food service workers? $14,996. Based on these numbers, I think it's pretty obvious now. These are the folks we're talking about who live in our community who can't afford housing here. I'm going to move on to our first speaker now, who needs no introduction to many of you. Eric Turkington. Eric is an attorney and a former member of the Massachusetts House of Representatives. He serves as a town meeting member. He volunteers for many local organizations, and he is currently the treasurer of the Falmouth Housing Corporation, who has built many of our affordable units in town. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Eric Turkington.
We need someone who knows what she's doing with this, and that ain't me. Okay. Okay. This I can handle, and they gave me a microphone, so I think you can all hear me. When Sam suggested I should come and speak here, I told him that more people in this room will know more about this subject than I do, but that I could contribute a little bit of history. And so you're going to get a little bit of history as part of my presentation here. Because Falmouth has not always been in the situation it's in now as far as affordable housing. I'm going to tell you about an affordable house in the 1950s. There's quite a few of these around Falmouth. It's the Sears Roebuck house. The deal with Sears Roebuck was that you could order a house from the catalog, the Sears Roebuck catalog. They would send it to you on a railroad bed. It would have 30,000 pieces to it, and you would have some directions on how to build your house. And if you wanted to buy a Sears Roebuck house, Sears Roebuck asked you two questions. Do you have a job? And do you own a piece of land? And if the answer was yes, Sears Roebuck would sell you a house and you would build your house. This one was the one the Turkington gentleman moved into in 1958. It cost them $10,500. And when it came time to buy it, my father said, gee, I thought we were going to get that lot next door as well. And they said, oh, okay, that'll be $1,200 more. That was Falmouth in the 50s. In the 70s, You could buy a lot in North Falmouth for $12,000. You could get a construction loan for $35,000. And if you could learn how to shingle and you wanted to work on it, you could build a house in this town for under $50,000. Until the last decade, things were very different in that regard. Every year in this town, we built between 200 and 400 new homes. In 1986, which was the peak year, we built almost 600 new homes. And these were not McMansions. These were not big fancy waterfront properties. They were small, two-bedroom, modest homes, affordable homes. Even 10 years ago, most Falmouth home sales were under $300,000. Today, if you look in the enterprise at the real estate sales, you won't find any for under $300,000. Okay? And the building permits in 2017, we got 51 single-family home building permits. The cost of the structure, never mind the land, the median cost of the structure was $520,000. So clearly, in Falmouth today, darn few people can afford an affordable home, and we aren't building any. Now here's the history lesson, okay? On the left is the first affordable housing that was built in Falmouth. It was built by the federal government right after World War II. We had millions of troops coming home. They all needed housing. There hadn't been any housing built during the war, so the government built it right in the corner of Queen Street, where David Wald's development for whatever he calls it, but it's condominiums now. But it was rows of affordable housing for veterans. The other project that is still around now is in Amvitz Avenue. Those were built by the federal government for returning veterans. There's an urban myth that they also installed a sewer line in the promise that Falmouth would shortly have sewers, which of course they're still waiting for sewers on Amvitz Avenue and a lot of other places. But in 1948, the government decided that they couldn't be building all the houses, but they started the program that is now the Federal Falmouth Housing Authority, and they built units all over town: Harborview, Rosemorin, Tatticat. They've got Sky Sites, Salt Sea, and Tote Lane were state programs, but again, federal dough. Total of 309 units were built and are still run by the Falmouth Housing Authority. In 1986, that all ended. President Reagan decided the government should get out of the housing building business, and the Congress went along with it, and so they moved into tax credit financing and vouchers and a number of different ways of dealing with affordable housing, short of having the government build it. So in Falmouth, we have the Falmouth Housing Trust, which was founded in 1986. Peter Kerwin and myself and a couple of other people went to a Board of Appeals hearing on something called Falmouth Woods. It's now Ballymead. 800 acres, big fancy out-of-town developers were going to put in swimming pool, club, golf course, big fancy houses. And we went to this and said, well, what's in it for Falmouth, and what's in it for Falmouth people who need housing? And as a result of that, they reluctantly agreed to contribute 20 acres for affordable housing. And one of the problem was, of course, who gets the 20 acres? The town of Falmouth wasn't the appropriate body. So Peter Kerwin and a bunch of other people started the Falmouth Housing Trust, and they got the 20 acres. It was a rocky beginning. They put up one house, and the recession came along, and they couldn't afford to put up any other houses. So it took a while before the housing got going, but it did get going. And then now the Falmouth Housing Trust has 18 units on that piece of property. They've got 6 units on East Ridge. They just recently did a beautiful job at the Oddfellows Hall. Deer Pond Road, they put one in, St. Mark's. So Falmouth Housing Trust has 32 units and one group home in its inventory. Then we have the Falmouth Housing Corporation, which was started in 2002 by Bob Murray. Bob was a pharmacist in Arlington who God spoke to him and said, "You're not going to be a pharmacist anymore. You're going to do affordable housing." And Bob came to the Cape, and he was working at Hack, and he was working at Harwich on the food pantry housing program there. But what he did that got everybody's attention is he decided he would walk every year from Provincetown to Woods Hole to send a message to the world that we need affordable housing here. And Bob walked 90 miles every year. First it was just Bob. Then it was Bob's friends. Then it was people Bob talked into going. Then it got bigger and bigger. By the end, it was quite a parade, and it raised a lot of money for affordable housing. But that's how we all got to know Bob. And so when a vacancy came to the Falmouth Housing Authority, we said Bob would be great for this. And he applied, and we got wind of the fact they weren't going to hire him. And so Tom Cahere and Tom Lynch and myself went to see the chairman of the board and said, what are you thinking? You know, this Bob Murray is the best thing you could ever have. So they changed their mind. They hired Bob Murray. And it was the best thing they could ever have done. So Bob took over the Falmouth Housing Authority, and at the time they had 6 scattered site units that were in such bad shape they'd boarded them up. And Bob said, well, we'll start with these. So he went around to all the contractors and all the lumber yards and all the suppliers. And he said, donate, we're going to fix these houses up. Give me your help, give me your lumber, give me your stuff. And he went to the State Department of Housing at the time, and Mary Padula was secretary, and he went to see her, and he said, you know, I'm doing this, can I get some help from the state? And Mary brought in all the lawyers in the department, and they sat down with Bob and her, and they talked it out, and they all explained to him why they couldn't possibly do that. Couldn't do anything of the sort. And in all these regulations, they couldn't do it. So Bob said, well, I'm going to do it anyway. And before it's done, you're going to be down here with a check for me, because this is a project you want to be associated with. And before it was done, Mary Padula came down here with a $100,000 check for Bob to finish those 6 houses. But he figured out pretty soon, though, that Falmouth Housing Authority was not the place to be if you wanted to add housing in this town, because, as I say, the federal government was done with doing it. So he started the Falmouth Housing Corporation. And as you can see now, we have 223 units, thanks to Bob. 704 Main Street's kind of an interesting one. It used to be a bowling alley there. Then it was a restaurant. A guy named Smith ran a restaurant called Smith's Old Surrey Room. Once a year, he would have all the important men in town come and have a venison dinner at the Surrey Room. But he passed on, and the property moved over to the outfit that takes blood out of horseshoe crabs. But when they decided to move up to the Technology Park, the land became available, and Bob acquired it. And that's why we have 704 Main Street there with 58 units. Bob did Schoolhouse Green. He went to the people in T-Ticket and said, what's important to you? This is after the VFW moved out because they couldn't afford to run it. And the land reverted to the town, so the town had it. But he needed T-Ticket's buy-in, and he went to T-Ticket and said, what can we do here that'll make you happy with this? And they said, well, we'd like the old schoolhouse, which was sort of hidden under the VFW building at that point. We'd like the old schoolhouse restored. Bob said, done. So now you drive by and you will see the restored schoolhouse, and you'll see 39 units of elderly housing that Bob built. He pulled a deal in Edgerton Drive up in North Falmouth. In Woods Hole, he was given a piece of land that he really didn't want to get into, but the town had this big fight about how come there's no affordable housing in Woods Hole. And the town said, well, let's put it in this piece of land next to the fire station. And the people in Woods Hole said, well, no, that's Webster's Woods. That's old growth forest. You can't have affordable housing there. So there was a big fight about that. Fortunately, for all concerned, there was a project that wanted to go ahead, a profit-making project, and it required land or a donation to affordable housing. So they acquired the Oshman property on Woods Hole Road and gave it to Bob and said, okay, here's your land, go build some affordable housing. Well, by then Bob had passed away, but Linda Clark picked the ball up and ran with it. Now we have, you see that top picture there? Now we have 11 units of affordable housing in Woods Hole. Gifford Street, you've all driven by, you've seen all that. We have scattered sites, and if you drive by Spring Bars Road now, you will see 40 units of affordable housing going up right there on a piece of land the town acquired 10 years ago. But it's going up now, so there's 223 units there. Other developers in town over the course of time, the home ownership units, we have 74 home ownership units. We have subsidized rental units of 382 units. But almost every affordable unit created in this town since 1986 was developed using Chapter 40B. The state's goal for Falmouth, for every other town too, is 10% of affordable units. Falmouth's current goal is 1,487 units. Falmouth currently has 959 units. Falmouth needs 528 units to meet the goal. Until we get there, we are subject to things like this. This is a proposal to build 104 units of 40B on 2 acres of land on the main street of this town. And we are going to find out whether anything can be done about it, but the experience of every other developer who's wanted to do 40B is that nothing can be done about it. That if they come in with a plan that checks the boxes, they can build something like that on 2 acres in Falmouth. And that's not the only one that we'd rather not have seen. There's been 40Bs in the home ownership line that have caused huge controversy in the Heights, up in Hatchville. It's an unsatisfactory process because it's a blank check for people like that. And until we get to our 40B goal, they can write that check and we can't stop them. So how do we reach the 40B goal? 2 ways, ownership or rental, okay? The ownership model. Developer builds 20 units, 15 he sells at market rate, 5 he has to sell at a defined affordable price. So he's added 20 units to the town's total number of units. So our goal has now increased by 2, because there's your 10%. So the net gain toward the 40B goal of this 20 units is 3 units, okay? So building 20 units gets us 3 units closer to the goal. It's something, but it's not much. The rental model. The developer builds 20 units, 15 at market rate, 5 are affordable. He's added 20, so the town's goal has increased by the 2. So the net gain toward the 40B goal is 18 units. See, they don't care that the 15 units aren't affordable. They just want rental. It meets the qualifications of 40B. So if we build 20 rental units, we get 18 counted toward the goal. So let's think about this. Affordable rentals are the town's top priority. The housing production plan, and anybody who's ever thought about this, has said that there is a compelling case for rental units. And you can see the compelling case is not only the arithmetic, but what you heard earlier about who we're providing the housing for. Now, affordable rental housing, we've gone through some of these numbers, but just the key number to keep in mind, and you've heard it from her as well, is that these are people who make this kind of money are a lot of people we know, like a lot of people in this room, like a lot of people in this town, making under $60,000, $69,000 a year for a couple. That's not rare. It's not rare at all, and we have a lot of them. 23% of our householders in this town rent, and most of them are in these categories of 69,000 for a couple, or 55,000 for a couple, or even 34,000 for a couple. They're all right there. Just about everyone interviewed for this housing study, this was the 2014 study, 32 people knowledgeable about housing conditions in Falmouth said the town's major critical need is suitable, low-cost rental housing for young workers. We need these people. Now here's the other piece. 30% of the Falmouth households have at least one member over 65. We are older than Florida. We are older than almost any demographic place you can think of. We are certainly way older than the national median. The waiting list at Schoolhouse Green, Linda will tell you, is over 100 applicants. That's for elderly. And as the report of 2019 says, rental housing needs of seniors are growing and the cost burdens remain significant. We need housing alternatives for that 30%. Not only do, those are not the people we necessarily need, those are the people we are. Just looking around this room and looking in the mirror. We're there. This is not for someone else. So why don't private developers build affordable rentals in Falmouth? Okay, number one reason, building costs are high in the Cape. You cannot build a structure on the Cape that's suitable for human habitation for less than $250,000. It really cannot be done. Your second reason is that the market rents won't support that $250,000, much less land, much less profit. If a builder went out and borrowed $250,000 from a bank for 20 years, he'd have to pay the bank $1,515 a month. He's not going to get that in rent. End of conversation. The third reason is if you're a developer, it's a much less advantageous business model than the home ownership model. With home ownership, you build your buildings, you build most of them to the market that's out there, you sell them, you take your profit, you're done. With rentals, you're not done. With rentals, you've got to manage it, chase tenants around, deal with it for a long, long time. If you're a developer, it's a no-brainer. You wouldn't do rentals, and they don't. This will be somewhat controversial because I know the planning board has been playing around with the idea of somehow upzoning and creating an area where somehow affordable housing could flourish. We tried upzoning in this town some years ago. For a long time, business zoning and industrial zoning were business and industrial. That's all you could do. Some years ago, we said, oh, you can do your business and industrial, and you can do 6 units of housing, too. Well, sounds like a great incentive. Well, all the builders, all the people who own industrial and business land agreed, and they all built housing, and they all built condominiums that cost $400,000 and $500,000. They didn't build any affordable housing. 15 years ago, we tried a little harder. We tried business redevelopment, a zone on East Main Street. We thought, okay, we'll let you go up to 8 units there and put up a bigger business building than you would have been able to before. So what happened there? That was 15 years ago. We've gotten 18 rental units in 15 years. So clearly, it's not working. At least it's not working the way you would hope it would. And not one of those 15, by the way, is on our list of subsidized rentals, because they're not. They're private market rentals. Any developer who wants to build up to 20 units on an acre right now can do so. Just call it a 40B. Set aside a quarter of them for affordable, meaning 80% or less, and you can rent all the rest at market rates if you want. And the fact is they don't do it. And the economics we talked about earlier is the reason they don't do it. So what can Falmouth do to encourage building more affordable rental housing? Developers need 3 things: land, money, and support. Okay, let's talk about land. The town has been pretty good about occasionally finding a parcel and moving it into a developer like the Falmouth Housing Corp., the Falmouth Housing Trust, Habitat for Humanity. All of these parcels, St. Mark's Way, the Oddfellows Hall, Esker Place, Spring Bars Road, the parcel we just bought for Habitat for Humanity, all those parcels were parcels the town acquired and turned over to a developer, a nonprofit developer who would build affordable housing that does get on the affordable housing inventory. So that's, the town's done some of that, and good for them. Money. The Commonwealth and the federal government have been, through this tax credit financing and grants and loans, have contributed a lot of money to most of the housing that's actually been built in this town for affordable. The town has also stepped up to the plate using community preservation funds. And their contribution lately has been $65,000 per unit for an affordable unit. And that is about 25% of the cost of building that unit, and that's a pretty good incentive. I think any of the nonprofits that have been able to use it have found that it makes the deal work. I have a little hint to throw out here to the Community Preservation Committee. If they would, which they have already done the first part, they have already verbally at least committed themselves to $1,350,000 in the next fiscal year for this purpose. That would subsidize 20 new affordable units. If they increased it to 70% of the estimated available CPC funds in 2022, which they could do under the Community Preservation Act, that would subsidize construction of 42 new units. Now you're talking. The committee can do that. I think the town would support them if they did. Third piece is that any developer needs support. And this is sort of a simple one. Reach out to the large parcel owners and ask, what can we do to help you to develop multifamily rental on your property? The planning board's been looking at Davis Straits, and they've been looking at Tiedemann Highway. There's half a dozen parcels there that are owned by, we know who they're owned by, we know what they have now. They all have different issues as to why they don't do it. Some of them are near wetlands, a lot of them have long-term leases with the tenants who are not interested in having affordable housing taken over their parking lots. But some of them may be interested in having a conversation. And the first question to them has got to be, what can we do to help you make this happen? That's a conversation the town doesn't have too often with people who can do these kind of things, and we should. So here's my wind up and here's my pitch. Falmouth knows what we need to do. We need to do more of it. Thank you.
Eric, thank you for your history of affordable housing in Falmouth and for your insights and strategies how we can get this done. Next part of our conference tonight is going to be hearing from some of our residents in town who live in affordable housing. We have 3 residents who live in affordable housing, and I'm going to ask them to come up one at a time and share their story with you. First of all, I'd like to bring up Tricia Hurley. Tricia is the owner of an affordable unit. Tricia.
Thank you all for coming tonight. I guess I would say my story is what they would call a cautionary tale. So in 1995, despite doing all the things that my parents told me were the right things to do, go to college, get a degree, find a job, don't come back home, find your own place to live, but we'll support you with love and encouragement. And so I did that, and I came to the Cape and fell in love with a young man who was a native of Falmouth, and I realized I had a serious addiction, and that addiction was to salt water, any large body of water, but particularly salt water. So when he asked me to marry him and live here in Falmouth, I thought that was just a dream come true. And it was for a short time. But in 1995, with 3 children under the age of 6. I found myself living in a home that didn't belong to either my husband or myself, and that I was in a marriage that was dangerously unhealthy, and that I had to take a big step and put my big girl panties on and take my 3 children and make a life that was going to be healthy for us mentally, physically. But I didn't have a car, I didn't have a job, and I didn't really have any furniture. We were living in a furnished house that belonged to his family, and I did not know what I was going to do. So I really thank the community of Falmouth, because my family and friends urged me to come back to the Boston metro area. But when I found a family whose kids I had taught swimming lessons to, who offered me a 3-bedroom furnished home for $300 a month, and it had a water view, I couldn't say no. So I moved in with my kids, and one of the fathers at the elementary school asked me to come and work for him at the Falmouth Enterprise, so I got a job. I got health insurance. I then realized that as long as I had this landlord, I might be able to get through this okay. But people from the community anonymously began putting bags of groceries on my front porch, gallons of milk. I had people offering to take my kids when school ended and I wasn't quite done with work, and they didn't ask me for any money. So I reciprocated by taking their kids on the weekends so that they and their husbands could go out for a romantic night, and I thought that was working well for everyone. And things were okay. I felt like I was giving my kids a safe home, but in a few years, when the kids were in elementary school, the landlord decided to sell the house. So then I experienced the real fear and making deals with the devil as I tried to find a safe, affordable rental, trying to keep my kids in the same school that they loved, where all their friends were. And I ended up making very creative deals with, I won't call them devils. Some of them were really good people. But they wanted so much money for a pretty simple 3-bedroom house, or even a 2-bedroom. And some of them weren't in very nice areas, and they wanted over $1,000. So back in 1995 through 2000, even though I did my best sales job at the Enterprise, I wasn't making enough money to afford that kind of rent. So I made deals like, how about if I let you come down for a month and I'll take the kids in July and we'll farm ourselves out, and then you could have the house, and then could we lower the rent? I will do landscaping, I will do painting, I will fix everything that goes wrong in your house. And I was able to get my rent lowered. But I lived every day wondering, was this the month that they were going to tell me they were going to use the house? Their kids were going to buy the house. So that was very, that aged me quite a bit. I worried every night that this was all going to fall apart. And then I found out about 6 housing lotteries, all pretty much in a row in this community. Developers like John Drewley, I don't know if John's here. There were condominiums, there were 3-bedroom houses, and I was so excited. I got my paperwork together and I got pre-qualified, and I went to these lotteries, and they picked sometimes 3 names, sometimes 5 names, and never my name out of that bucket. So for 6 years in a row, I I never shared it with my children, but I drove by those parcels. I watched those houses go up. I had the furniture picked out, and it didn't happen. So when I was at my wit's end, told by my landlord she was raising the rent $500, so I would then be about $1,700. There were no more deals I could make with her. I found out that there was a restricted deed home in Esker Place, the first affordable units that we built in this town, for resale, meaning a family who got in 1999, had lived there for 5 years, and they were ready to move on. So the house had to be sold to a qualified buyer. So I went through a roller coaster ride, worked with Bob Murray, and I got the house. So in 2005, I moved in with my children, and there were 17 neighbors in the neighborhood. One was a retired minister from St. Barnabas and his lovely family. In my neighborhood today, we have plumbers, we have Morse Pond School teachers, we have people who work at Falmouth Hospital, people who work at the scientific institutions in Woods Hole. We have waitresses, we have school secretaries, we have a school bus driver. I hardly ever see these people because everyone in their household is working. So it's sort of a laughable moment in the morning when I wake up at 5:30 and I hear truck engines starting up and car engines, and it's a nice feeling knowing that the community of Falmouth is humming. It's coming alive, and all the worker bees are going off to their jobs. And then they come home at night, some work the night shift. I've worked 3 jobs up until this summer. And so I'm so grateful that the creative genius of these members of this community came up with some ways to provide this affordable housing. And they've continued with the Housing Corp, as Eric mentioned. But I left my job at the enterprise when a job that was really interesting to me came about, advertised by the Falmouth Housing Authority. And the job was to manage the wait lists and select people who are eligible to move into housing. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have come full cycle here. Now I have tremendous compassion in my job as the tenant selector at Falmouth Housing Authority. I've been doing this job for 4 years, and I see every day people in desperate situations. I see the fear in their eyes, and I understand where they're coming from. Their stories are endlessly fascinating to me because what happens to people can happen to people in a trophy house, people who have money in the stock market, a couple who are both working. What I hear day after day is the loss of a spouse, a catastrophic disease that you get diagnosed with, the loss of a job, will bring you to your knees very, very quickly. So they end up on my doorstep, whether it's a family looking for a voucher or it's elderly and disabled people who want a safe, affordable place to live and they're on a fixed income. The waiting list for our elderly/disabled housing funded by the federal government is over 760 people. The problem is when people get their housing, they will stay for 20 or 30 years, and I don't blame them. It's safe, it's well maintained, it's close to everything, they're in a community of like-minded people. So we just don't have enough turnover to satisfy 760 people, some of whom have been on the list since well before I got there. So my story really could be anybody's story in this room. But I appreciate so much the creative thinkers, the progressive thinkers in this town, and I know you have it in you to spread the word and let everyone you know get involved in this. I think of things when I'm driving down the road. When I heard that the Falmouth Service Center was moving to a new building, that was fabulous. It is fabulous. But what are they doing with Emerald House? Couldn't we put 3 veterans in there? We need so many one-bedroom units. I can't tell you, that is the greatest need. And so that's what we have the least of. So I urge you to think outside of the box. Buildings that I go by on the highway, I often have had conversations with Linda Clark saying, hey Linda, have you looked into that building? Bet we could get 20 units out of that. So that's the way I see our community. I have tremendous faith in all of you. You showed up here tonight, and I think that we can do this. And feel free to tap into me for any way I can help you with, not that we need more data, but letting you know what I'm seeing on an hourly basis every single day that I work for the Housing Authority, what the need is, and really I have so much admiration and respect for the people who show up in that building and share their story with me. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Tricia. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing your story with us and expressing your strength and tenacity and what it took to get a safe, affordable home for you and your family. Thank you. We have 2 other residents of affordable housing in town, and they both live in rental units. I'm going to ask each of them to come up and share their story with you. The first person I'm going to call up is Patrick Fortin. Patrick lives in North Falmouth in Edgerton Drive. Thank you.
All right, I just want to thank you all for having me here tonight. My name is Patrick Fortin, born and raised in Falmouth with 2 parents who both worked for the town of Falmouth. Very great childhood, very great upbringing. I can say nothing but the best about Falmouth. Let me break the story down. About a year ago, I was living in a basement apartment, working my job 40, 50 hours a week. Everything's normal. And me and the missus found out we were expecting. So as we thought to each other, we're living in this basement apartment, can't raise a kid here. What can we do? And we reached out to multiple different real estate agencies trying to get a place, see what we could do, and it just was totally out of our budget. Even with me working full-time at a dealership down in Yarmouth. Through friends, Linda Clark reached out to me, and she said, hey, I have a perfect living situation for you. Come on down to Falmouth Housing Corporation on Main Street, and we can talk about what we can do. I said, okay, great. So I went down to Main Street with me and the missus, and talked to Linda and Kathleen Botello. And they told us, they gave us an offer on the Edgerton Drive apartment, and we couldn't turn it down. And now I have a newborn at home with the missus taking care of him every day, and I'm off at work 50, 60 hours a week now, just making up, doing everything I can. Without Linda and Kathleen reaching out to me, there's literally no way where I'd be. I don't know where I'd be living. I don't know where my child would lay his head at night. And as of right now, he has a roof over his head to keep him warm in the winter time and cool in the summer. So for that, I say thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Patrick. I think we can collectively say in this room, we're so happy that you've had that opportunity for your family. We have one last resident speaker who is also a renter and lives in Edgerton Drive. Adam Schwab. Adam, would you come up, please?
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Adam Schwam. I'm also a resident, lifelong resident of Falmouth. My whole family's lived here forever. They actually run a race in North Falmouth for my grandfather every year, the Paul White Road Race. Graduated Falmouth High School 2007. But during that time in high school, I really started to struggle, like a lot of the youth today has. I found myself in active addiction, and my active addiction was not to salt water. So I really struggled growing up. Through most of my young adult years, I found myself in and out of trouble for most of my young adult years. And 5 years ago, the best thing that could ever happen to me happened, and I overdosed. Found myself at Falmouth Hospital, found myself in treatment, and while I was in treatment, I found a 12-step fellowship, and it changed my life. When I had about 18 months clean, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little emotional. When I had like 18 months clean, I got granted full custody of my daughter, and as long as I could get a place for her to live, and I was actually living at recovery houses at the time, and so I called Linda Clark, who owns or is the director of Falmouth Housing Corporation, and she was more than willing to help me. I've actually known her since I was little, and since I was like 5 years old. And she said, I'll do whatever I can to help you. And they set me up with Housing Assistance Corporation. They paid first, last, and security for me. Within 2 months, I was in an apartment, affordable apartment with my daughter, full time, single father. Kathleen Botello, who also works for Falmouth Housing Corporation, found a house that was giving away furniture. And she personally went and helped me move furniture that she got for me into my new apartment. Currently, still have full custody of my daughter. She's a student at North Falmouth Elementary. She's about to turn 7 in November. I now work in treatment. I've worked in treatment for the past 4 years. I work at Recovering Champions currently in Falmouth. So I have the ability to give away the hope that was so freely given to me. Also, the Lord has blessed me again 5 days ago with a 9-pound baby boy, my first son. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We just brought him home from the hospital yesterday. So just from doing the next right thing, it's weird how, and stop doing things my own way, it's weird how good things just start to happen for you. And I just want to thank from the bottom of my heart, it's been truly an honor to come here and speak for two people who mean so much to me, have done so much for me, about a cause that has personally helped me out so much. So I just want to thank Linda, Kathleen, and Falmouth Housing Authority, Falmouth Housing Corporation, and for giving me this opportunity. They've really given me the ability to become the man that I always wanted to be and the father that I always wanted to be. So I just want to thank them for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Adam. That's a very compelling story. It takes a lot of courage for our residents to come up here and share with you their experiences that they have gone through trying to maintain their livelihoods and their lifestyles in the town of Falmouth. It takes a lot of courage. And I hope you would please join me now in giving these residents a round of applause. Thank you. I think one of the things that you're going to continue to hear, which is a common theme in all of our speakers tonight, is that it takes a community to build affordable housing. It takes a community to support our residents in finding affordable units where they can have safe homes for their family. The next part of our agenda tonight, we're going to present another side of the affordable housing issue, which is our employers. Our employers need to be able to have housing that their employees can afford, which is a challenge here. So we have a panel coming up that will express what they have done, what their experiences are as employers in town. I'd ask you all to come up now, please.
Never get a back operation.
So we have 3 employers, and I'd like to introduce them all to you. First, we have Bill Zammer. Bill and his wife Linda are local business owners who have been extensively involved with a variety of Cape Cod charitable organizations. Bill has been the owner of Cape Cod Restaurants, Inc. for over 30 years, which includes the Flying Bridge in Falmouth, one of the 50 highest grossing restaurants in America. Bill, would you share your story with us on what you have experienced in finding housing for your employees and strategies you've employed?
Yes, I guess I was very fortunate about 25 or 30 years ago for Army President. For some reason, I decided I was going to have to house people because I couldn't find employees to work for me. So I landed up buying this old hotel, which was actually not a hotel, it was another kind of
It was.
a brothel, I think.
Yeah.
And we converted it into housing. There was a house behind that. And it was the first time I did that. And we had not only, we had teenagers at first, which was a big mistake, but then we ended up also getting a lot of H-2B employees from Jamaica, but also local people who couldn't find houses. So we actually housed them all year round. So between that and the last couple of years and the other restaurants I own, I house about 110 people, either full-time or part-time. Some are year-round, some are not, and it's all, we subsidize it heavily because of what they make. It's sort of a misnomer, though, in terms of what people make. The average person working, I have not paid anything less than $15 an hour for years, by the way. That's, I don't know where that number comes from. You don't find people for less than that if they're any good. So most of my people make over that, except for the teenage hostesses, which is a whole other story. But I like to think a little bit out of the box in terms of what we did. The dormitories, we call them dormitories. And I think when we talk about housing, and I find out people now, and you got to define what you're looking for. The people I see in all walks, whether they're the managers or the, and we play chefs, sous chefs. They're making $75,000, $80,000 a year. They're not getting not a little bit of money. Cooks are making $50,000 and $60,000 a year. So we're not paying people. It's still not enough. You need $60,000, as you pointed out earlier, for a place. But you need to find out what we're looking for. What we see now are the divorced woman or man who cannot afford to go to an apartment. They need what they're looking for is a dormitory room, basically. The old-fashioned, someone mentioned, a rooming house. So back in the old days, we had rooming houses, and I have some of those. So the rooming house is, 5 people living there. Actually, one place, I just built a place in Dennis. There are 8 people living there. They have a communal kitchen and a real nice living room. We have Wi-Fi in there, the whole bit. And again, and they're doing wonderfully there. And that's housing, as compared to saying, okay, go out and try an apartment. So that's one way of doing, defining what you're looking for in terms of housing. So I'm not sure if just saying you're going to get the apartment or the condo is the right thing, or the actual. And the millennials, by the way, are not buying houses anymore. They'd rather rent if they can find the rentals, as you may know, because they're not committed to marriage, which is a whole other situation. So, but I found a lot of things that trouble me. I've tried to be a landlord over the years at times. The tenant landlord laws are so stringent in terms of being a landlord. You don't want to be a landlord. And the chief will tell you, if someone stops paying you, you can't get them out. It takes months. I actually pay people to leave in some cases, and of course they make a mess out of the place before they leave. So being a landlord is very difficult. So I think those laws have to be looked at. It's not just zoning, it's the tenant-landlord relationship laws. And I think I'm trying to cover as many bases as possible. The other thing that really bugs me is just recently, I guess it was the other day, they threw 37 people out of motels down in Truro. These people were living there, okay, and they said they were substandard. But where do they put them? They have no place to go. So okay, so they didn't have sprinklers, and they didn't have certain things, but there was a place to live. So maybe somehow if the towns would get there and say fix them up to a certain level, maybe not the top highest level, but some level. We don't have sprinkler. I have a sprinkler in my house, so why do we have these sprinkler all these houses? Something has to be done with those rules and regulations to make it not so onerous for the things. And I'm not saying you should have that the landlord should beat up on tenants and have bad places, but something should be done on those kinds of situations. The other thing I see, this is funny, is my own mother, we're looking at assisted living for her, and she's 94. She's in better shape than I am. But looking at that, she would love to get out of her house to go into assisted living. Now, obviously, I'm wealthy enough, I hate to say that word, to take care of it. But there are people who would love to get out of their house into one of the assisted living things. So we need to look at loans of some sort to get these people out of those houses and loan them the money somehow to get, or somehow subsidize in these smaller assisted living places. And you'd open up houses, which would be very valuable to young families, which the young man just said, as a child, that's the perfect place for them. So something has to be done that way, and that's being sort of innovative. And again, someone also mentioned that first, last, and security deposit. That's a killer. They don't have that kind of money. My wait staff, for example, the gals and guys there, they're making $40,000 or $50,000 a year. But if they're divorced or they're single, they can't get that lump sum of money up. So somehow, some sort of a funding. Maybe you talk about CPC money. Maybe that's where some of the money can be used as some sort of subsidized loan, so they can get that first, last, and security deposit, so they can get into the place. And I think they would actually pay it. I think they would do it. They just don't have the money. They don't have $3,000, for example, $4,000 in their pocket. So I see that as another possibility. And the other thing that bugs the hell out of me is we've got this wonderful place over there called Otis Air Force Base. Otis
Joint Base Cape Cod.
Joint Base Cape Cod, but I just call it Otis. I'm old. So, but here's this place. We're ready for World War III out there. I mean, there are barracks out there where the beds are still made. There's got to be a way we should figure somehow. Maybe we could use some of those barracks to help house people, particularly the homeless people who are sitting in shelters, NOAA and all the rest. Not NOAA's renamed now, but all these shelters. But there's very innovative ways that I would see we should be looking at, and that's kind of my story. But we try and do the best we can. Again, it pains me, and I hate to say, I bring 110 people, 120 people in actually from Jamaica every year to run my restaurants. Without them, I can't operate. I cannot find American workers, not only because, and it's not because they don't want to do their job, by the way. That's all bullshit. I'm sorry to use that word. They want to work, but they can't afford to live here. So it's as simple as that. I'll give you an example. So we went to, Dan Wolf and I went back years ago, went up to, and Wendy North Coast, went up to the hood, the neighborhood up in Roxbury, that area, with the reverends up there recruiting people to come down here to work. We would train them, we would house them, and we would have them give them jobs. And the reverends were going to help us out, the pastors of the various churches. You know how many people applied for the job? 0, because they did not want to leave the hood. So there's a whole other thing that we're not trying to find American workers. please dispel that rumor once and for all. We can't find them, and when they do, they can't afford to live here. That's kind of my story. We're done. Okay. Chief. Oh, by the way, I did used to work with Paul back at the hospital, and I do remember trying to recruit more the executives. I was even worse.
Thank you, Bill. From another
And
employee.
one other thing, there are two reports. I was going to print them out, but there's a report from the Stephanie Cox from the Housing Assistance Corporation, which is an excellent white paper. I'd suggest getting it. I'll get you. If you need it, I'll get you that. There's another report which is also excellent. It's from SGE, which is the Smart Growth Economics out of Cambridge. Two excellent reports on Cape Cod and it deals with Falmouth. I highly recommend both those reports.
Thank you, Bill. Our next speaker is a pretty familiar face to everyone in this room. Chief of Police Ed Dunn. Ed has been a member of the Falmouth Police Department since 1981 and has been the Chief of Police in Falmouth since 2012. He supervises more than 50 police officers and other staff members who work for the town. Ed, you have a little bit of a different perspective. Would you tell us your perspective on this?
Yes. The police department's a civil service police department. We hire off a state civil service list. And when we hire what's called the residence list. There's an overall list for everybody in the state, and then there is one that's broken down as a resident list. So the people that we look to hire are Falmouth residents. And because of their ages, they're in their 20s usually when we hire them. You know, they're still living at home or they're living in apartments. When I started in '81, I can say that probably 95% of the police officers on the force lived in the town of Falmouth. The officers want to live in the town of Falmouth. It's better for the community. It's better for the police department if we need them on anything. So, as I said, it's a little bit different. They're already residents. But where it gets here is once they're on the job and they're working, of course they want to go out, move from mom and dad's home and go out and get their own home or their own apartment. Currently, right now, we have around 55 police officers in the police department. And right now, 17 of them live out of town. And I have a couple of my civilian staff, I have 2 that live out of town. As a police chief, and some of them live over the bridge, and under the civil service rule, they have to live from the border of Falmouth 10 miles as the crow flies. So we've got officers that live up in Plymouth. So if we have any natural disasters or snowstorms or anything like that, my concern is getting them back on the Cape. So for public safety, to serve this community. I spoke with the fire chief as to his staff also. He hires off the residence list also, but he also extends it out a little bit further to the non-resident list, because they attempt to hire what are known as paramedics. And he had said to me that they also have a similar issue with people who, if they do hire, they give them 9 months to relocate under the civil service rules. And a lot of times he said that they can't find anything and they go back to the town that they originally came from. So it is a little bit difficult for the public safety services, for those officers, to find affordable housing for their families.
To follow up with your situation, I just want to mention a 2014 report from the Northeastern University Dukakis Center for Urban and Regional Policy. Between 2000 and 2010, the Cape saw a 26% reduction in year-round residents 45 years old and under. A 26% reduction. More conclusively, the study found that people are not only leaving the Cape, but they're not being replaced. Those are pretty astounding numbers. Our next speaker tonight is Paul Niedzwiecki. Paul is the Vice President of Strategy and Government Affairs for Cape Cod Healthcare. His past positions include Executive Director of the Cape Cod Commission, Assistant Town Manager for the Town of Barnstable, and Chief Financial Officer and Special Assistant District Attorney for the Cape and Islands District Attorney's Office. Paul?
Thank you. And I think Cape Cod Healthcare operates the 2 acute care hospitals on the Cape, Falmouth Hospital and Cape Cod Hospital, as well as the 4 urgent care centers and a number of other facilities. We're the largest employer on Cape Cod. We have 5,300 employees, 500 doctors, and over 900 volunteers. And that's not uncommon in certain areas with community hospitals being that anchor institution. So we have a number of employees that would fit into those affordable criteria, but there just isn't enough housing for them. And we have people that make much more than that too. So some of our housing challenges, as Bill mentioned, recruiting executives, for example. The Cape has a third of the Massachusetts coastline, so a lot of coastal property, and we have below average median income as compared to the state average. So those high land costs and those low wages create an affordability issue. So whether you're a doctor or a nurse and you come out of school and you're trained, that's a very portable degree. So you get to choose pretty much where you want to go and live. And when you choose to come to the Cape, you're choosing to buy into a real estate market where you're gonna buy less than you could someplace else. And a lot of the bigger urban centers are real draws for executives and some of the healthcare professionals that have a lot of training. So we have difficulty recruiting across the board, and housing is the number one piece of that affordability issue that we deal with. My department also oversees the community benefits program at Cape Cod Healthcare, and so we're a nonprofit, so we don't pay property taxes, but we have to give back to the community. There's a community benefits program. So Cape Cod Healthcare gives back $27 million a year. A lot of that is in sort of direct medical services, but we have a $1 million grant program that we put out there too. And part of what the federal and the state government is pushing healthcare to do, especially community hospitals, is to look at what they call social determinants of health. So beyond physical health, chronic and infectious diseases, we have to start to look at issues like housing and transportation and safe and affordable food, because those things contribute to whether your population is a healthy population or not. And the whole healthcare reform initiative is based on moving away from a fee-for-service model and moving towards managing population health. So that is a focus of ours, both through the community benefits program to keep the community healthier, and in recruiting employees. So we see the effects of the housing challenge in different ways. Some of it is we're the 3rd oldest county in the country. There are 2 counties in Florida that are older than us. So we're pretty old. And that's a consistent thing. We're not very diverse, we're very old, and we're starting to see those impacts on the housing market too. So we don't have the sort of continuum of housing stock that other communities have. So there's a lot of focus on affordable housing, and there's plenty of people that want to build McMansions on the ocean. But in the middle, there isn't as much. And so we have people that live in what could be affordable units now, but they've got no place to go, no place to progress to. We have people that live in what could be affordable units now who want to stay in their community, but want a lifestyle that's more walkable and a little bit more urban. And we don't have a lot to offer there either. So I think the biggest challenges I see going forward, drawing on some of my past experience, a lot of it is about local zoning. 8 units an acre isn't going to get you there. 20 units an acre might. I mean, we need 5,000 units. If we had 5,000 units across the Cape today, they would be gone tomorrow. And so that's a big demand. And we can't I mean, 40B has positive aspects to it. Most of your affordable housing that's been constructed has been constructed as part of that program. But you're only building affordable units when the market's strong and you're building market rate units, which continues to make the problem more and more. It's kind of this illusory goal. And the state statute of 40B is really based on the fallacy that all 351 municipalities in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts have the same capacity to produce affordable housing. But more importantly, and this is what I think you're sensing in Falmouth right now, is that 40B leads to random acts of density. So when you're dealing with issues like wastewater, is an incredibly costly issue to all of you on your general tax fund, when you start to see density pop up in nitrogen-sensitive watersheds, we're all going to pay for that. So what I think communities need to do is look at those areas where you have existing infrastructure and try to create incentives and change the zoning to have the housing developed there, because that makes the most sense from a cost perspective. It's so expensive to build anything these days that we have to break the mentality, and I experienced this at the commission, where a developer comes to town, wants to build units, and we think they should build us a new school for the privilege of providing homes to our community. We can't do that. We've got to flip that. And instead, we should be making public investments in infrastructure in those places where we can handle growth and where growth will have a benefit. In some of the more historic parts of the Cape, these old economic centers and old main streets that are tired now and need revitalization, if we were to put the right kind of housing in there, you could change the economics of issues like wastewater. The financing of wastewater is pretty simple. The more users you can get on the shortest length of pipe, the more sustainable and less expensive that system's going to be. So it makes a difference where we have growth. And we have to get a handle on that. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges in front of us. But I'm also struck by Eric's history and a lot of discussion about Bob Murray. And I don't think you can undervalue the leadership that people like Bob brought to this issue. And we need to do that. We need to find leaders in the community that are going to work on answers that are based in the community and are sensitive to the community that you're dealing with. Statewide initiatives are going to build one-size-fits-all approaches, and they are never designed. They can't. It's not that government's bad. It's just it's not designed to do that. We have to find housing solutions that fit the context of the community where we want to build the housing. And so that leadership has to come from you. It has to come from the community. So let's get smarter about zoning and infrastructure. Let's find leadership in our communities, and let's not be afraid to break some of the rules. That's my advice. Thank you.
North Cross sent me an interesting thing this morning. We've lost 3,000 single-family homes in the past year on the Cape, and we've gained 5,000 homes in the short-term rental area, Airbnb, those type of places. So what's happening, the major threat will now be that type of thing to rentals. So we have a very serious problem coming up.
Thank you, Bill and Paul. We have a few minutes available for questions from the audience. We have a microphone in the back of the room that Karen Bissonette, the Executive Director of Falmouth Housing Trust, will bring to you. Please raise your hand, and if you'll stand up and let us know who you are.
Hi, my name's Patricia Gadsby. I'm not a huge fan of 40B because I think it's kind of a losing battle. It does provide a small fraction of housing, but it's a game that you can never catch on.
Hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. To recap, I'm not a huge fan of 40B. Not that I don't think that the housing it provides isn't valuable. It obviously is, but it comes with the risks and costs, with developments that are perhaps, as Eric Turkington showed, on a too massive scale, too dense, and don't fit into the community, and at the expense of natural resources, wildlife corridors. I won't go into that too far. And My question is, in order to gain a little bit more control over the housing here, I've never heard anybody talk about a municipal bond or a county bond that's directed at affordable housing, and I was wondering if anybody could address why that is.
Paul, do you have any insights?
But it's possible. One of the issues that we deal with on the Cape is that, the rest of the world looks at Cape Cod as one place. They can't tell you whether it's in Massachusetts or Rhode Island, but they know it's one place. But when you cross the bridge, you hit 15 different towns, and then, I live in Barnstable, so they'll tell you what post office they go to. That's how balkanized we can get. So we have 15 different housing authorities on Cape Cod. You'd be hard-pressed to go to the same kind of geographic spread, population spread anywhere else in the country and find that many individual housing authorities. We have 15 different CPA accounts. Collectively, last time I checked, they were holding about 37 million that could be used for housing. The problem is it just gets divided up. So there isn't a lot of that out there. The county could, but the county's kind of a mess. So you gotta figure that out. We have one of the last viable county governments in the state that brings in at least $7 million annually that is raised on Cape Cod that should be used for Cape Cod. If you put that into a capital trust fund that could be used for housing, think of what you could bond with $7 to $10 million a year. But there just aren't those kind of discussions happening at the regional level in county government. The DAs were ripped out and sheriffs ripped out, so it's become a collection of sort of a historical accident more than any sort of governmental planning, and it's a remnant, and it's a collection of things that are nice to have but nobody needs. So a reprioritizing on a county level is something that really needs to happen. So it would be great if some of you decided that you're interested in that and wanted to run for county commissioner or get involved with the Assembly of Delegates and start to push those kind of reform efforts on the county level.
There's also a psych ward at the hospital you go to after you run.
That's full. That's full. No more beds.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much. I appreciate all the information and the context that it's been put in here, and then to hear some of the beneficiaries really is powerful for me. There's one piece of information in all the data that hasn't been put out there, and I wonder if someone can provide that. And that is, in order to achieve the 10% that we need, how many units is that in Falmouth? I have a feeling that hasn't been discussed because it's probably very scary. But 508?
528.
528. I missed that if you said it then. Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for one more question.
Hi, Vicki Lowell. I have to defend the county a little bit. Now that you don't work for it anymore, you're jumping all over it.
Right.
It can do better.
No, I think there is a lot of room for change. But money, Eric clearly put that as one of the things you need to do affordable housing, because the housing costs are so much more than the salaries that a lot of people earn on the Cape. So I was wondering, this is a far out idea, but we have these huge oceanfront and other houses that are over any normal family could live in, even with luxury, in 2,500 square feet. And they're building, 5,000, 8,000, 10,000 houses. Is there any way we could say, if you build over a certain size, you have to put a certain amount of money in an affordable housing fund?
Yes.
Probably would take a state law to do it, but it makes a lot of sense to me, because those are the people that need the most service workers that aren't paid well enough.
Thank you for that comment. That's some innovative thinking that we need here. One more comment?
Mary Harris, I had a simple question. Mr. Zamron, when you had 110 people living in a hotel, was any of that considered affordable?
Yeah, It's all subsidized.
You are subsidizing, but does it meet the definition of affordable for counting how many units we need for 40B?
I don't think so. No, it's a dormitory. It really isn't considered that. Well, if they want to take them, you can count them. Garrett, go ahead. I don't think you can do that.
One of the most interesting affordable 40Bs that was put up in this town is Atria Woodbriar. That's 125 units that showed up on our affordable housing inventory. Think about that. 25% of them are rented to people of medium to low income, and the other 3/4 are $5,000 and $6,000 a month rented to people who have dough. All 125 units count toward our goal. It's a few more of those and we'd be in pretty good shape.
Thank you, Eric. I'm going to ask the panel to stay in your seats. We may have more time later on for questions, but I'd like to thank you all for providing your insights and your strategies and your trials and tribulations for your employees. Our next speaker is going to talk with us about his experience trying to develop affordable housing in town. He's Christian Valley. Christian is President and Chief Operating Officer of the Valley Group. Prior to joining the Valley Group, Christian was a project manager for a custom home building and remodeling company. He's a member of the Falmouth Historical Commission Board and the Belonging to Each Other Advisory Board and the Cape Arts and Entertainment Board. Please welcome Christian.
Thank you for having me. This is great. It's nice to be among my peers and people in the industry who are in this town that are just doing fabulous things. And much of what I was going to talk about has already been said, so I thought I would wing it a little bit and talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we have in this town as developers and builders of affordable housing. And we've built both for ourselves as private developers. We did a project in North Falmouth called 21 Pine Street, and then we've built as builders for a lot of the nonprofits in town, the Falmouth Housing Trust, the Falmouth Housing Corp. Both organizations doing terrific things. And so the biggest challenge I think today for us is the cost of construction. Why is it so expensive to build affordable housing? 15, 20 years ago, you could build a affordable housing for $80 to $100 a square foot. Today, those costs are double and rising. Tariffs in China and Canada have driven that up. The cost of just raw materials has gone through the roof, and labor costs have gone up. A lot of that is due to, of course, a very strong economy, but things are not getting any cheaper to build. So what are some of the things that we can do to build more efficiently? Modular construction is one thing that we're looking at. We just recently finished a 10-unit apartment building over in Mashpee Commons. It was not an affordable, it had an affordable component to it, but that building was built as a modular unit, so it came in pieces, 13 pieces. It was built in Paris, Maine, and was trucked down, and we put it together, and the cost of that was significantly less than what it would have been had we had to have built it as a stick frame building. Um, some of the other things that have driven up the cost, infrastructure costs are also very expensive. Typically, road costs would be $200 to $300 a square foot. We're seeing that again is doubled. The cost of bringing all of the utilities to a piece of land are very expensive. There's been a lot of talk about sewer. Sewer on the Cape is critical to developing land. If you are required to put a septic system in and it's a denitrification system, that really hinders you both in the amount of land that it takes up and also in the cost. So I can't stress enough how important it is to continue to put sewer in so that land can be used for building homes and not for putting septic systems in. A couple other things I just wanted to touch on. When anybody talks about 40B, there's always a sort of a negative connotation, and people generally that aren't familiar with it tend to think negatively about it. I think one of the things that would be helpful for developers and builders in this town is to have a set of design review guidelines. If there were some guidelines that developers were to follow in their production of affordable, or when they're doing communities, whether they're energy efficiency guidelines, amenity guidelines, what are the amenities that you're going to provide for this community? What is the landscaping? What is the streetscaping? What are some of the things that make the project look good? Because I honestly think that the important part of developing 40Bs is creating a project that the town can be proud of and that the developer can be proud of. So I think that there are a lot of builders and developers who are doing it now. I think having a set of design review guidelines that at least they know here are some of the things that are important to the town when you're doing this. Density is such a hot topic. I know that builders trying to get as many units in an acre is difficult. Then again, you're trying to offset the cost of building the affordable housing because you're essentially losing money on those homes. So having more of a dialogue about density is important. Understanding the density can be different for the different product types you're building, whether you're building condominiums or whether you're building fee simple, whether you're building rental, whether you're building standalone homes, apartments. I think it's important that we all get on the same page in terms of density. A couple of just ideas that I have about possible solutions for creating some more affordable housing. I think the accessory dwelling unit bylaw is a pretty interesting bylaw. It allows up to 850 square feet of an accessory dwelling unit. That's a pretty good. There was a discussion earlier about single residence occupancy. That's a pretty good size building. So if we could incentivize landowners, people who have homes and are willing to put an ADU on their property, I think that would really go a long way. How do we incentivize them? I don't know, but getting more of those and getting people to take advantage of that bylaw it would be great. I think that if we could get another source of funding for affordable housing other than the CPC, there are allocation of meals and hotel taxes to get people to for land use and for infrastructure use and for wastewater use. That would go a long way. And then the zoning issue, of course, if we had an overlay zoning where we could get the density that we needed without having to go through the 40B process, that's been talked about a lot tonight. The timing on the permitting process is a hindrance. I have to say that the time frame it takes to get from A to B to get your permit can be anywhere from 6 to 12 months, 18 months. we need to expedite that. We need to figure a way to get the zoning, get the permitting done quicker. Again, if there are design review guidelines in place, that will help so that developers are coming to the table with plans that have been well thought of. So those are some of the ideas I have and some of my thoughts. It's really nice to hear from the people in this town that are living in the homes and the units that we're building. That's really the most important thing, and I thank you for having me.
Thank you, Christian. We have some more time for some questions or comments.
Hi, my name is Mark Finneran. I have a little background in this. My father was the chairman of the Housing Authority in the state of Vermont for years, as well as at the same time he was the director of the Council on Aging. And as far as this town's concerned, I was the one that put the article in to put the affordable housing in Webster Woods after the town paid, I think it was $30,000 for the study, which determined that was the best spot. And actually I put that in twice, which, as Eric explained, did lead to some units being built. But I'd just like to point out one place where this town, and all towns in the Commonwealth for that matter, or many, shoot themselves in the foot. And that's in the area of open space. This town is upwards to 60% open space, and we have this zeal to continue buying all these large open plots of land where normally affordable housing would be put on affordable land. I think that should be considered, and this should be slowed. I mean, it's almost too late. 60% of this town is off the books or whatever. We can't build on it. Look at the list of conservation restrictions we have, and we lose there as well. We lose the land, and we lose the tax dollars. So I, just as a cautionary tale, I think that the next time a parcel of land comes up, like, for instance, one of the last three was the Dario project parcel. I can't remember how many acres it was, 88 or something like that. And we purchased it for basically walking paths. Well, remember the next time you buy a large piece of land to put into open space for a walking path, you're blocking the path to affordable housing for a lot of people. And sorry, we did a lot of this to ourselves, and we should have thought about it a little clearer, a little earlier, because we're literally responsible for driving these people out of town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Anyone else? Comment or question?
Yes. Hi, I'm Bill Marston. I got a couple of questions. One is the affordable condos up in North Falmouth. They've got the units built, nobody wants them. Now what do? Will they lower the price on the next time around to make it more affordable?
You're raising a very curious point tonight. Thank you.
Curious,
for
I
bringing it
should
up.
think we would have an answer for that.
I can tell you from my perspective why we're having trouble getting applicants for that development. Those units are selling at the affordable units, I believe, $239,000. $232,000. Thanks, Karen. There's also a homeowners association fee. Now, that selling price is a price that is approved by the state of Massachusetts, Department of Housing and Community Development. The developer can charge that. What we see, though, is that people still can't afford it. They have to get a mortgage that they can't qualify for at their income levels. what will happen next? The developer is closing applications October 11th, I believe. If no one has qualified for that unit or those 2 units, the developer will start the lottery process over again. There's no requirement for that developer to lower the price. We've spoken with him and asked him nicely if he would do that, and maybe he will.
So they could stay vacant forever.
I believe that, as is the case in most of our affordable developments, the developer is required to sell the affordable units first before they can go on and sell the market rate units. So that's an incentive.
So, so will we put up more condos? Doesn't sound like a good idea.
Well, hopefully we can build some more condos that have a lower price point. Thank you.
We also had a house that was repossessed by a bank last year, an affordable home that was repossessed. And the town stopped the auction, the bank auction, and we never heard any more about it. I've inquired, I get no answers. Do you know what happened to that unit?
That unit had a deed on it that did not survive foreclosure. When we first began developing affordable units, the deeds didn't survive foreclosure. And then, 8 or 9 years, 10 years ago, the state developed a new deed restriction that now does survive foreclosure. But there are a few houses from initial developments that still have those deeds on them. And the town of Falmouth went to court to stop that foreclosure. But unfortunately, the judge decided against us. You bring up an important point.
So now it's out of affordable housing then, right?
Yes, it is.
And what's to save all these other homes that you're putting in now? Is it guaranteed that no other ones will be?
The houses that are being built now, the condos that are being built now, they all have the updated deed restriction placed on them so that those deeds do survive foreclosure.
Well,
Thank you.
Carla, Carla, over here. Hello, over this way.
Oh, hi, Bill.
I hate to leave this on a downer. I just watched this town build a $10 million senior service center, which is spectacular. And I think that, the employers in town, we've all talked about the situation that we're facing with getting, employees. We're being self-serving, by the way. We're not just nice guys. We need employees. And in order to get these employees, we've got to do something. And I think, working with the Chamber of Commerce, certainly Linda Clark and Karen are doing a spectacular job in what they're doing. And I know a lot of us have contributed to help that effort. It can be done. I wouldn't be in such a downer. We need the units somehow, some way, and it can be done by pulling together. And I'm not doing rah-rah stuff. The chamber and the employers need to get together with some people from with Linda's group and Karen's group and pull this thing together. Because it's not 500 units is not that far away. I mean, it really isn't. It's just a matter of finding the space to put them, and I think it's there. I mean, the legend of Bob, is still around, and we loved him, and if we could only find someone like him again, we'd be in great shape. But let's not go on a downer. Let's keep this on the upside.
Thank you, Bill. We have time for probably 2 more comments or questions.
It's past my bedtime.
Does that 500 units take into account the new constructions being built that are not affordable? So every year we build new constructions that are not affordable. How can we know that we're going to have 510 units next year? Do you understand my question?
Eric, would you like to respond to that?
Here, take one of these. Eric, take one of these.
Okay, in the year, 2 years ago, 2017, we built 51 new single-family homes. That means our goal, the 10% goal, increased by 5 units. So instead of needing to build 528 affordables, we had to build 533 affordables. So it goes up, but it only goes up by 10% of the number of new units you actually build.
Thank you, Eric.
I get confused about this. We want to build over 500 units, but that's a number that relates to having enough under 40B that we can afford what they wanted to do at Liberty Green. But in the meantime, we need a lot of housing for people, and Mr. Zama housed 110 people in something that never counted for anything. Why aren't we talking about how many units we need to actually house people, whether it counts for 40B or not?
It's a large number of units that we need. You're absolutely right. And Tricia? Rooming houses do not count. In order to count on the state's subsidized housing inventory for Falmouth, all the units must be affordable in perpetuity. That means forever. So they have to have a deed restriction on them. That goes on. And not all of these units do have them. If they are built through the comprehensive 40B process, they do have that.
So one thought that I have in my driving around the neighborhoods is that nursing home next to Morse Pond. So as I sit day after day with people, you know, between the ages of 45 and 70, who are single people with a lot of dignity and a lot of gumption, and they've been diagnosed with Parkinson's, MS, and they don't want to be a burden to their family. They can get disability, so for $750 a month to live on, there's no place to put them. But they would love the community of a shared space, and I picture that nursing home, which is bedroom units with bathrooms in them, and think how delightful it would be if somehow we could buy out this group who bought that and is letting it sit. It makes me sick. Every day I drive past that place on my way doing errands, and I say, how many units are in there? 80, 100? Yeah, 120. And I just can't believe we can't come up with a way to do.
You know, more importantly than the units, you could actually house people, which is more important than counting the units.
Well,
That's
right,
you're right.
right.
You're right on.
But who do we have to talk to change the fact that the units don't
I
count?
can get Julian over there and get him working.
I mean, you would keep them, each room could have a deed restriction on it, so that that unit is always a subsidized unit. I don't understand why we couldn't do that.
Well,
is it a town issue, Julian, or the state statute?
It's a state statute.
So we need a revolution.
There you go. As we're talking about this, you know, we've listened to stories from residents, from employers. We've seen the history, heard the history from Eric. We've heard from Christian. I'd like to recognize, though, now some of the other people in this room who make affordable housing happen, and that is our developer community. In addition to Christian, we have a few developers in the room, and I'd like to acknowledge them. We have Michael Galasso, John Drewley in the back of the room, Karen Bissonette, the Falmouth Housing Trust. And I'm not sure if Linda is still here, but Linda Clark from Falmouth Housing Corporation. If there's another developer I've missed, I apologize.
And you.
Thank you.
You did a great job.
And Carla, can I just recognize our friends from HAC that are here? I know that David Quinn is here, and Michael's here, right? So, and they do so much, you know, they're based in Hyannis, but they do so much in our community as well.
They do, and thank you. HAC is one of our partners. And HAC assists us with many of the resale units in town. And I would like to thank them as well. We've come to the end of our program this evening. And I think there's a common theme here. And that is that it takes a community to build affordable housing. It takes a community of employers, our elected officials, our boards and committees, our developer community, and the strength of our residents who continue to fight for affordable units. People wonder when they walk out of this building tonight, I think, what can any one of you do individually to help build affordable housing? Well, we have a variety of committees in town that I'm sure would love to have your support. Attend their committee meetings. We have the Community Preservation Committee, who funds many of these projects, the Planning Board, the Zoning Board of Appeals. Attend their meetings, speak up, have your voice heard. I'm going to get past these slides. Remember who we're talking about here. This is the face of affordable housing in Falmouth. If any of you have some comments or questions, you'd like to reach out to us, we have some contact information here for you. The Affordable Housing Committee, the Falmouth Affordable Housing Committee right now has one vacancy. If any of you are interested, you can contact Ed Curley, our chairman. Ed? Is? The Planning Board, you can contact me. In closing tonight, and I do want to close on a positive note, and this is about community, and Falmouth has a very strong, active community. And I have a quote here by Desmond Tutu. Do your little bit of good where you are. It's those little bits of good put together that overwhelm the world. You can make a difference here. Thank you very much for your attendance and participation this evening.